Let's bring in Chris Stigall.
He is Chris Stigall.
Chris Stigall.
I'm joined now by Chris Stigall,
host of the Chris Stigall Show.
So let's bring in talk radio host Chris Stigall.
Also, his podcast is a must-listen every day. Chris Stigall Show podcast.
And host of the Chris Stigall Show.
Let's bring in Chris Stigall.
Please welcome Chris Stigall.
The Chris Stigall podcast is presented by usmedicalplan.com. Save big money monthly and get better health coverage at usmedicalplan.com.
Hey there, thanks a lot for downloading the Chris Stigall Show podcast. Glad to have you along today. Thanks a lot for giving this a 5-star review and a written review at Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you get an opportunity to do it, it's always helpful to the operation here. We're grateful that you do that and let other people know about the podcast. You have helped this thing grow by leaps and bounds with your support over the years. We're so thankful. And we also can't do it without your support of our sponsors. And the fact that we have great sponsors in the podcast means everything to the operation. So if you enjoy listening to the podcast, if you don't mind rating it, and if you don't mind supporting great sponsors like our title sponsor, John Ruhlman. John has been with us now for a few years, and he is absolutely the best when you're looking for the best prices and the best coverage in health insurance. usmedicalplan.com is his website. Now, all you need to do is set aside, let's call it a half an hour. Reach out, usmedicalplan.com, or call 877-410-4321 and tell them what you're paying right now and what you think about your coverage right now. Or maybe you have some questions. You're just not really happy with your current health insurance situation. They'll talk you through your options. And here's the thing. At U.S. Medical Plan, they know 100 different private health insurance companies. So they're going to get you the best possible price and never going to skimp on coverage. I know a lot of people think, well, if it's cheaper, it's not going to be as good a coverage. Not true. In fact, what you'll find when you work with U.S. Medical Plan is oftentimes you're paying more. You're paying much more than you should be for health insurance for not as great a coverage. 877-410-4321 or usmedicalplan.com. Well, good morning and welcome in on this Monday. Glad to have you along. I hope your Easter weekend was a good one. I hope maybe many of you had Good Friday off as well and had a long holiday weekend to enjoy with friends and family. I hope you did. Hope you had some time to worship as well, particularly those of you who are Christian. Interesting and I suppose in some ways fitting. If, in fact, the Pope who died at 88, that's the news overnight that broke this morning. I guess that would be officially Easter Monday in Rome. And the Pope came out, made some remarks, issued an Easter blessing, and then apparently died overnight, which, you know, if you're one for storybook endings, that's a pretty good one for a Pope. But at any rate, at 88, no, I don't think there's anything to do with J.D. Vance visiting. Although I'm waiting to read what David Hogg will probably blame J.D. Vance for killing the Pope today, would be my guess. But anyway, if for some reason you haven't heard that and you're just getting your day started with us, Pope Francis, who sought to refocus the Catholic Church, this from the Wall Street Journal, on promoting social and economic justice rather than traditional moral teachings, but presided over growing divisions in the church and struggled with lingering scandal of clerical sex abuse, has died. I think that's a pretty fair summary from the Wall Street Journal. Promoting social and economic justice rather than teaching morals, and presided over growing divisions. Is that about right, Fast Eddie? Now, the last time I brought this up, I got an angry email that I didn't know what I was talking about. Now, you are a Catholic. I have said and stipulated I am not Catholic. I don't practice. I am a Baptist, so I'm not. My wife was raised in the Catholic faith, but I can't claim to be any kind of expert on it. I have many friends, including you, Ed, who are in the Catholic tradition. So I can't render a verdict on what others inside the Catholic tradition thought of the Pope, but I think it's fair to say there was great division about him. Fair to say?
Yes, he has made a lot of public comments that have, borderline come crossways with a lot of Catholics, especially strict Catholics, for sure. Yeah, over the years.
And I also think, and over the years that you and I have talked about this Pope, I do think, while it's pretty clear he's, if you want, politically to the left of center, I think sometimes, to be fair, some of the things he says, as is usually the case with the press, they take some snippet of a sentence he says and blow it up to be an endorsement of something that it really isn't. That's also been true of this Pope. They've taken certain fragments of something he said and made it seem like a full-blown endorsement. As, for instance, gay marriage. This Pope said something, and I don't ever remember the context of it. They kept running with this. I've read this a lot. that the Pope, when talking about homosexuality, says, "Who am I to judge?" And that was interpreted some time ago to mean that the Pope does not take a position on gay marriage. And that was quite a stretch, for instance. Remember that, Ed? That "who am I to judge?" Those few words, they took that to mean that the Pope had basically said, if it feels good, do it, baby, go for it. That's not exactly true.
Of course not. Of course not. He said, yes, no, it was not "if he feels good, do it." It's just like the Catholic Church will not recognize same-sex marriage. Like, of course, it won't. That's not the tradition, and that's not what he meant, but the media did run with that one for a while.
Yeah. I heard a cardinal, I believe, I'm not sure, overnight I heard on the way in here this morning, saying that they hope, and this seems to be true for about all faiths, at least global faiths, they hope that the next pope will be selected from Africa, the continent of Africa, because, as is usually the case, Orthodox Christianity is healthiest. And this is across the board, whether you're Catholic or whether you're Protestant. I think it's probably accurate to say most Orthodox Christianity today is found in Africa. The continent of Africa is where people close. In fact, I know this a little bit about being a former Methodist, a long-suffering Protestant myself, bringing myself up in the Methodist tradition. When there was a vote on gay marriage in the Methodist tradition for years and years and years, globally, when they would get together to vote on this issue, it was always the African Methodists that shot it down, and they were the heaviest population. And so gay marriage was never sanctioned globally by the Methodist tradition because of the African Methodists. North American Methodists have been all about it for like a decade. They're like, bring it on. They want more of it. So that was when the great division happened inside the Methodist tradition, and now you have global Methodism, and you have effectively North American Methodism for all intents and purposes. So there is a great hope among traditional Orthodox Catholics, I think, that we see a return to Orthodox Catholicism, that, the Scripture, the actual Word of God means something, and we stick to that, and we preach that, and we believe in that, and we stand on the Word of God. And there's a hope that the next Pope is that kind of guy. We'll see. Anyway, had been in failing health for a while. I think we all knew that. Lived quite a bit longer. I mean, people have been telling me that this Pope was probably going to die, several weeks ago, and managed to keep kicking. We'd reached out to a few sources. The last time that I remember talking about the Pope in great detail was when he came through Philadelphia, our home base, and had the World Meeting of Families. That went off fairly uneventfully, Fast Eddie. I don't really recall that there was any big drama about that when the Pope, I think that was his last North American visit, the World Meeting of Families in Philadelphia. He met with some sex abuse scandal victims in the clergy sex abuse scandal. I remember that was a big deal. He met with some of them while he was in Philadelphia, if memory strikes me. But that's about all I can remember them visit.
No, and the World Meeting of Families was a big deal because, I mean, if you'll remember, Marky Mark, oh my gosh, his last name.
Mark Wahlberg.
Wahlberg, yes. He was in town, and that was honestly a big public show for it was a good moment for Catholicism. Everybody was on the same page and celebrating, and there really was no flack from that. That was a very kind of uniting time when he visited Philly.
Yeah. Jim Gaffigan, they brought Jim Gaffigan in to do some comedy for the Pope, which I thought was kind of cool for Jim Gaffigan, if you remember that.
Yep.
Now I don't know if you know this or not. Now I'm calling on your Catholicism and your study, if you have any, to tell me how this goes. How long does this take before they replace him? Do you know?
Time-wise, I don't, but I know that there is not a leader, like all business kind of stops right now. I know that. All the archbishops have to be notified, and I think that the death certificate, like the death of the Pope, does have to be announced on the square. I don't know that they've done that just yet live, but that has to happen.
Actually, I think they did do that.
I think
a cardinal came out and spoke this morning. Cardinal Kevin, someone or other, I think read that officially today, and they rang the bells there in Rome. I believe,
okay.
But don't quote me on that. So. The last time that they had to select a new pope, this pope that just died, Benedict quit, which never happens. And but what was interesting about that, I don't know much about this stuff, folks, so forgive me, I'm flying a little blind because I'm not a Catholic, but I didn't know this. When Benedict hung it up and said, I don't want to be Pope anymore or whatever, he didn't leave the Vatican. Did you know that? Benedict died there, and they were like co-popes or something. Not technically what they called it, but they like lived in the same joint together, like roommates, until Benedict died. Did you know that, Ed? I didn't know that.
As a Catholic, Chris, I didn't even know at the time that a pope could retire, quote unquote. I did not know that. That was a strange development at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So Benedict died, and then he became. I don't know if they were I'm not sure. But anyway, I asked Ray Arroyo, our friend down in Dallas at NRB. I saw him then when we knew that Benedict was sick, and I said, or Pope Francis rather was sick, and I said, do you want to see this Pope step down, since it looks like he's in pretty poor health? And Ray said, no, I don't believe in that. I don't like that. I don't like when Benedict did it. I don't think that should happen. So my understanding is for Catholics, that's not the way. Is that about right? Or do you know that whether that's true or not? That popes should die in the papacy? They should not resign or step down like Benedict did? I don't know the rules.
Yeah, no, I agree with Raymond Arroyo on that. I don't think Benedict should have stepped down. I think that, the Holy See, the pontiff, I mean, Chris, like we believe, he can speak. He among us can speak with God, communicates with the Lord. So I don't think that someone that has been elevated to that level in our faith should step down. No.
Mm-hmm. During the meeting with J.D. Vance on Easter Sunday, I mean, it sounds like Vance visited him just hours before his death, which, at that time, he was upright. He was sitting in a wheelchair. Obviously he was not well, but the meeting went well. The two exchanged Easter greetings in English. Vance, expressing his gratitude for the meeting, said, "It's good to see you in better health." The Pope responded warmly, wishing him and his family a happy Easter. As a gesture of goodwill, Pope Francis presented Vance with several gifts, including a Vatican tie, a red rosary for him, white rosaries for his children, and a set of 3 large chocolate Easter eggs. A separate white rosary was given to his wife. Following the meeting, Vance shared his gratitude on social media, saying, "Today I met with the Holy Father, Pope Francis. I'm grateful for his invitation to meet, and I pray for his good health. Happy Easter." That will be one that Mr. Vance, I'm sure, will remember for the rest of his life. Live shot of Vatican City this morning on Salem News Channel. If you watch, if you're listening, thanks so much. However you're consuming this show, we're just glad you're here. Thanks a lot for listening on the podcast as well. Our podcast numbers, incidentally, thank you, are through the roof. You guys listening to the show maybe later in the day because you can't catch it live for whatever reason, grateful to you there. SNC.TV, you can get the Salem News Channel app. Ran into a lady yesterday at Easter Sunday service. She said, "Chris, I love that SNC.TV. I love the Salem News Channel app." I click that, and I fire up the video, and I watch it in the kitchen while I'm making some coffee. Some days, if I feel a little tired and I want to go back to bed, I can just take you right back to bed. But at any rate, it's easy. Super easy. Get the Salem News Channel app, click Watch Now. It's right there at the top of View Live or whatever it says. It's just a big button there. You just click on it, and there it is. Or you can, again, those of you listening on great radio stations all over the country, Salem affiliates, thank you for being here, too. Coming up in just a little bit, and you can get all that information, by the way, at chrisstigall.com. In a little bit, we're going to talk with Father Frank Pavone. Glad that he could make some time for us today. Who is he? You might remember Frank Pavone is one of the, and I guess you call him former priest now, because it was this Pope who's just died, and that's the breaking news overnight. Pope Francis has died at age 88, and this Pope is the Pope that defrocked Frank Pavone over the fight on life and Frank Pavone's speech from his church. And so we'll get probably a pretty brutally honest assessment of Pope Francis's legacy and where Frank Pavone, a now defrocked priest, but still part of Priests for Life, still heads Priests for Life, what he has to say about that coming up. Meanwhile, over the weekend, the Supreme Court, I say inexplicably, though, I don't think it's all that inexplicable, in the almost literal middle of the night, paused the deportation of immigrants potentially subject to the Alien Enemies Act, freezing action in a fast-developing case involving a group of immigrants in Texas who say the Trump administration was working to remove them. This is from CNN. A group of immigrants. No, they're Venezuelan thugs is what they are. They're not a group of immigrants. It's, again, CNN and everyone else would have you believe that Trump is just rounding people up in farm fields and going door to door in hotel rooms and grabbing maids and shoving them on buses and driving them out of the country. That's not what's happening. As you know, Tom Homan and the Trump administration are wrangling up vicious, violent gang members and thugs, and they're here illegally, and they're deporting them, and they're using the Alien Enemies Act to do it, and the Supreme Court, save two, Alito and Thomas, Saturday, just up and said, nope, you can't do it. This from Town Hall, and it's pretty interesting. The Supreme Court issuing an order Saturday temporarily blocking the Trump administration from deporting 50 illegal immigrants from the violent Venezuelan Tren de Aragua gang. Alito, Thomas dissenting, as I said, with Alito writing a scathing dissent that Thomas joined. Two lower courts had already refused to jump in and pause the deportations. The order seemed strange since earlier this month, the Supreme Court, as you remember, ruled that Trump has the authority under the Alien Enemies Act to deport Venezuelan gang members, but it left the door open for litigation by stating that gang members could appeal their deportations on a case-by-case basis. Now, I will guarantee you, I can't prove it, of course, but I think it's probably pretty obvious. We know that people like Amy Coney Barrett and John Roberts, certainly. I can't speak for Gorsuch. I can't speak for Kavanaugh. And then the three ladies on the left, they're a given. But we know that Roberts and we know that Amy Coney Barrett are subject to popular opinion. And they blow in the wind. And we know that Amy Coney Barrett's family has been threatened. We know that Justice Kavanaugh's family has been threatened. These people are under great pressure. There's no question about that people are threatening their families and threatening their lives. And they also, like any other human being, and I know you say, but these are Supreme Court justices, Stigall. They shouldn't behave this way. No, they shouldn't, but they're human. And there is this popular sentiment that is brewing thanks to the theatrics of guys like Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen, and a Beltway media set that says the Trump administration is out there rounding people up like the days of the Japanese internment camps, and that this is cruel and inhumane. And so I don't doubt that a good number of these Supreme Court justices who decided to throw a wrench in Trump trying to deport these illegals on Saturday, it was a lot to do with public sentiment. And they don't want to be a party to what is now seen as the new Nazi movement in the country, which is pretty rich, and I'll detail that in more detail in just a minute. Sit tight. We're going to spend some more time coming up on that Supreme Court ruling over the weekend. In fact, we're bringing in one of our favorite legal beagles, Mark Weaver, to discuss over the weekend the Supreme Court inexplicably stepping in and stopping Donald Trump from sending some of the most violent Venezuelan gang members who are here illegally out of the country. But that's what happened. So what's that all about? We'll unpack that coming up. We continue to monitor things at the Vatican. Those of you watching on the Salem News Channel, you're seeing some live bump shots of the Vatican. Many, many tourists happening through there. As I understand it, Pope Francis met yesterday with Vice President Vance and then came out to greet many folks there in Rome, I guess, and gave some Easter blessings and then died. I don't know exactly the time that happened. It was overnight for us, but I guess in the middle of the day, Easter Monday there at the Vatican. We were thinking of various guests to reach out to this morning, and we were thrilled that one of the very first that popped into our mind was able to make time for us today. Father Frank Pavone, he's the director of Priests for Life, national co-chair of Pro-Life Voices for Trump, and we've spoken with Franco over the years. I think the last time he and I talked was maybe a couple of years ago at the NRB. And Frank, it's great to have you back, sir. I'm glad you could make time right off the top this morning.
Oh, I appreciate it, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Now, look, you and I, the last time we talked, you kind of unpacked for me the background that I think a lot of people who know you are familiar with your history with Pope Francis. But for people that may not know your history with Pope Francis, I'd rather you tell the story than I recount it. Do you mind?
Sure, no problem. Well, I head up one of the largest pro-life groups in the world and in the Catholic Church called Priests for Life. And I've done so with the blessing of popes ever since John Paul II, and including Pope Francis. I had the opportunity to meet and talk with him about 5 different times, and all of those occasions were moments when he encouraged my work, especially the work we do with healing the wounds of those who've had abortions. Pope Francis, of course, put a lot of emphasis on God's mercy and healing and welcoming of the sinner. And so when he knew of my work with doing that, and he encouraged me to go forward with it with great confidence. Some bishops in the church, however, to this day, oppose the work that I do. I think it's basically a matter of control. It's not necessarily a matter of not being pro-life, but, they like to control everything. And, we got pretty big and influential. And so they convinced Pope Francis to throw me out of the priesthood. And that, of course, like many other things that Pope Francis did, it just left a lot of people scratching their heads and said, wait a minute, this is the most visible Catholic priest fighting abortion full time, and you're throwing him out of the priesthood? And it was for no substantial reason whatsoever. They were making up excuses over the course of 20 years to try to... It was cancel culture, Chris. Cancel culture and weaponization of government in the church, just like we've seen in American politics. But that's the long and short of it. But fortunately, I continue my work full-time, as you know, because we have the support of the people of God and of many, many... not only Catholics, but Christians across the board who want to see an end to abortion.
Do you think, Frank, ultimately that their decision, or I guess Pope Francis's decision to defrock you, was that pressure on him, or was that his own decision? I mean, you said you met with him many times personally, so where does a decision like that come from? Were people on the outside deeply influential on this pope, or did he bring to the papacy his own politics?
Yeah, it was a combination of both. He didn't have much of a regard for American conservative politics. And, of course, I was, my ministry put me right in the center of that. And I proudly stand there. As you mentioned already, I served as the co-chair of Pro-Life Voices for Trump. I've been an ardent supporter of the president. And in the course of these battles I had with some of the bishops, that question about support for President Trump came up very explicitly, and they didn't like the fact that I was doing that, but I stood my ground and I said, he's the best friend that the Catholic Church has right now in the world of politics. I don't think Francis understood that or appreciated that. So it's partially him, but it also is, as you point out, pressure from other bishops, because I know the ones that members in the American hierarchy who they're woke. Is the only way to summarize it. They buy into the woke culture. They're sympathetic to the Democrat Party, and that's insane, because the Democrat Party hates the church and hates religion, hates God, and hates the dignity of human life. But yes, I know for a fact, because like I say, it was a 20-year battle, that many of these left-wing bishops did in fact pressure him to do this.
Frank Pavone is director of Priests for Life. He's the national co-chair of Pro-Life Voices for Trump. I have a lot of questions about this. First of all, from your perspective, if I could, I just want to stay focused on you for a second. Yesterday, Easter Sunday, how do you today, I guess technically as a defrocked priest, how do you worship? How do you practice? What do you do? Do you lead any kind of worship? Do you attend worship? Are you still a member of the Catholic tradition? Where do things stand?
Yeah, just like any Catholic lay person, I went to Mass. I went to Mass as a participant in the congregation, so I can't go on the altar and celebrate the Mass. Although the interesting thing about this is, as many do already understand, you never lose the priesthood. The church can say you can't function as a priest, but if I were to say a Mass, as I am allowed to do privately, It's a real mass. I mean, the Eucharist really happens at that moment. I could also absolve sins. These are in cases of danger of death. Even if there's another priest there, I can still administer those sacraments. So the ability to do that can never be taken away once somebody is ordained to the priesthood, but the church can regulate how those functions are exercised. So, I'm a Catholic in good standing, participate in the church. As far as ministry, though, I am, of course, as anyone is, permitted to do my own work in teaching the faith. So I do broadcasting every day, scripture, teachings, particularly on pro-life, since that's my full-time focus. But I do get a chance, therefore, to preach, if you will, but as a layperson. And I often tell people, the fact that they told me I couldn't exercise my role as a priest doesn't mean I forgot everything I learned over the past decades, right? I can still, I can give a good message and inspire people understanding of the scriptures and of the faith.
I'm glad to have that background because what I wanted to ask you, I'm sure you have a great deal of interest in who the next pope will be, and who do you think ultimately will influence that? I heard some commentary early this morning from a priest who said, gosh, I hope it's high time we bring in someone from the continent of Africa, because that's where some of the most orthodox and traditional Catholic priests reside. Is that about true to you? And what do you think? Who should replace him?
Well, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I've said exactly the same thing. We need a pope from Africa. It would be a blessing for the church. The church is thriving there in so many ways. Some of the African cardinals I know, they have such a knack for just teaching the faith clearly in a common sense, understandable way that is faithful to what the church has always taught. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't other cardinals that do exactly the same thing. There are many of them. And the fact that Pope Francis has appointed so many cardinals does not mean they all think like he does, and that they all agree with the kind of leadership that he exercised. I think that all of them, just about all of them, they see what we see. They see what has happened. Now, some of them might think it's good, but there's been a lot of confusion and division in the church. And we need someone who can teach the faith with simplicity and clarity and not buy into the woke agenda. I think what can give us great, right? That's infected.
May I ask you on that point, Frank, because this is something that we've studied a lot, and this is certainly not exclusive to Catholics. I mean, I'm a former Methodist, for heaven's sake, so I know a thing or two about this. But this kind of progressivism, this Marxism that has infected so many faiths and faith traditions, how real is that among cardinals? Is that most? Is that half? Is it a third? Is it a small fraction? What do you think?
I think it's still a small fraction, but they're vocal. They are tied in deeply with the Democrat Party in America. They feel they have a lot of political weight, and but they are a minority. And yet some of them are. What's the majority? The problem is that the majority, although they might not agree with this woke, bizarre insanity, they're silent. They're cowards. Most are cowardly. A minority are actually buy into the woke agenda. But when you combine a minority that actually buy in with a majority who are cowards, you end up with a big problem on your hands. But I think that what we can hope for, I think it's reasonable to hope right now that the way the woke agenda has been rejected in American politics and in the recent elections in many countries where we've seen this shift towards more common sense conservative governance, I think that's going to spill over into the Catholic Church with this upcoming
Frank,
of the new Pope.
I have heard this. Father Frank Pavone with us, by the way, the Director for Priests for Life. We're discussing the death of Pope Francis at age 88, overnight for us, or I guess what would be Monday at the Vatican. I have heard that there is a real resurgence of Orthodox Catholicism, particularly among younger people that are coming back to the church, and young men. Can you speak to that? Are you seeing that? That is back to the traditional Orthodox roots of Catholicism. Is that happening? True. Is that real?
It is real. I see it, of course, in the pro-life arena. I deal with the various facets of the pro-life movement. I'm traveling constantly throughout the United States and interacting with grassroots groups. And yes, that's a trend that I see. In fact, it's very much tied in with the cause of pro-life is a flashpoint for this. It's a clear indicator because it's one of those issues where, if you take, the conservative, the traditional Orthodox teaching could not be more clear, and yet it's also a flashpoint for battling the culture, and few battles are more intense than the one over abortion. So in that arena, we see the phenomenon that you just described, and in many other of the movements that have arisen within the church. And that's the thing for people to keep in mind, that the church is not just the diocese, the bishop, and the parish. There are movements. There are movements which are go across parish and diocesan, if you will, bureaucratic church lines. And they just unite the people around a cause and around a teaching that they embrace. I always told people when they were confused about something that Pope Francis said, I said, listen, you don't have to worry about being confused about what the Pope says. You never have to be confused about what the faith says. And it's 6 simple words to remember: what the church has always taught. Those 6 words, that's what's key. And it's because that's what's key that the phenomenon you just described is real, and people are recognizing the faith is what it is.
I want to keep you for a second, if we could, please, because I got a couple more questions, if you don't mind. Father Frank Pavone was good enough to make time for us on the passing of Pope Francis. Sit tight, Father. I'll come right back to you if you don't mind. We're continuing to cover the news overnight. Pope Francis, dead at age 88, and Father Frank Pavone was good enough to join us quickly this morning. We woke and called him, and he was so nice to stick around for another segment, by the way. Thank you so much, Father, for your time again.
My
Director
pleasure.
of Priests for Life, National Co-Chair of Pro-Life Voters for Trump, or Voices for Trump. Could I just ask, in terms of mood or sentiment, how you feel, how Catholics feel, how cardinals feel? What is the sense of things when a pope dies? I know Benedict, for instance, resigned or stepped away, and from what I'm to understand, most Catholics don't like that. They would prefer a pope die in the papacy. Is that about right? What's the sentiment?
Yeah, we're not used to the idea of a pope resigning. We're just not used to that. It hadn't happened in hundreds of years. So you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, and so this is solemn. This is serious. This is urgent. What is this for Catholics?
Yeah, it's I would say, especially in terms of Pope Francis, it's a moment of mixed emotions. For Catholics, the office of the Pope is sacred. It's part of our faith, and yet we know the Pope is not an oracle. In other words, it doesn't. When people hear about the infallibility of the Pope and they misinterpret it to say that, everything he says is right. That's not what it means at all. That applies to him teaching, like we said in the previous segment, what the church has always taught. Infallibility is a gift to the church, not a personal characteristic of the man. So we have been kind of spoiled. Our whole lifetime, most of the popes have been saints. You think of John the 23rd, Paul the 6th, John Paul the 2nd, John Paul the Great, as he's known. These were saints. These are canonized saints. So we've kind of been spoiled, and yet you look at the whole history of the church, there have been some pretty failed popes, pretty bad popes, morally bad popes. I look at the papacy of Pope Francis, and I say, this is a failed papacy. And the reason I say that is really very simple. And this is not a judgment on the man or his morals or his soul. God has now called him home, and God is the judge. No, but we can look at the effect of his papacy on the church, and it has been confusion. It's been a papacy of confusion. Things he has said, even calling into question, is Jesus the only savior of the world? Are there moral absolutes? Is God's plan for marriage and sexuality what we've always understood it to be? These things are not up to the Pope to change or even to question. The job of the Pope is to strengthen people in the clarity of the faith. And just using that job description alone, you got to come to the conclusion that this papacy failed in that primary responsibility. So it's mixed emotions. On the one hand, the Pope is a revered leader in the Catholic faith, and so there's always sadness. It's also a teaching moment that, hey, it's Christ who's the head of the church. The Pope, like the rest of us, are followers of him. We have to be faithful to him. But there's also, frankly, Chris, a sense of relief. It's like, okay, enough of this terrible confusion. Every time the Pope speaks, people don't know what he means. It's time for healing within the church. And
how long? And Frank, if I could ask you, what is the process? How long before you would see? I know there has to be a gathering of cardinals, right? And there's voting or decision making. How long does that take generally?
It'll be a couple of weeks. Church law calls for a 9-day period of mourning, and that, of course, begins today. And so there won't be any action taken in terms of formal electing of a new pope until after that. So, another week and a half or so, and we'll see a conclave take place. How long the conclave will last is anybody's guess. But in other words, within a couple of weeks, we'll have a new pope. And the interesting thing is, by the way, everything freezes now. When a pope dies, there can be no more administrative decisions made. For example, regarding the appointment of bishops or accepting their retirement or positions in the Vatican. In fact, all the official cardinals that run the offices in the Vatican, technically, their offices conclude now as well, because they serve at the pleasure of the Pope. And so none of them is certain right now that he will continue in his position until the new Pope reaffirms it. So it's an interesting, it is a hierarchy. It's not what we're used to in the American system. But, but as I say, a couple more weeks, we'll start seeing the drama of a new conclave.
With a new Pope, should things go the way we hope, I say we, I don't know. I'm not being Catholic, but I think a more traditional Orthodox papacy is what most hope for, at least on our side of the aisle. Yeah. Could you see yourself petitioning your way back into the formal priesthood? Does that work that way? Or
no, most definitely. Yeah, most definitely. I will request of the new Pope, as soon as he is installed, a reconsideration of my situation, because when you look at the actual detailed record of it, I mean, it was so clear. I was lied to. I was lied about. I was abused, legally speaking. It was lawfare. It was lawfare, Catholic style. And I'm confident that a new Pope with an objective. In fact, many of the high-placed cardinals advocated on my behalf. Who knows? Maybe one of them will become the next Pope, and then it'll be easy. It could. But I'll certainly put that request in. Yes.
Frank, I hope when that happens, I would love to continue to stay in touch and continue to follow this with you. Thank you for your work at Priests for Life, as well as the co-chair at Pro-Life Voices for Trump. And we're going to have you back. I can guarantee you that. Thanks for making yourself available this morning, Frank.
Okay, Chris. God bless you. Take care.
There's probably never been a bigger focus on health right now. The Maha movement, with the focus on eating healthy for a change. Very good news for my sponsors and friends at Balance of Nature. We have it in our cabinet. Take it every day. Their method of producing vibrant nutritional supplements is second to none. A lot of others use chemicals and additives. Balance of Nature is made solely from whole food. Other methods, they sacrifice nutritional quantity for the sake of profits and volume. But Balance of Nature, they have a very advanced vacuum cold process. So they freeze dry the fruits and the vegetables, and they retain 93% of their nutritional value. A lot of the other nutrients that you might see out there are lucky to salvage 30%. Balance of Nature packs a nutritional punch is the point. That's the whole reason we take Balance of Nature, and I think you ought to as well. You'll get the most nutrition for the sake of your health. And right now, if you use my name, Chris, as your discount code, you'll get 35% off, plus free shipping and the money-back guarantee. Call 800-2468-751. 800-2468-751. Use my name, Chris, as your promo code. You can also log on to balanceofnature.com and use the name Chris as your promo code. You'll get 35% off plus free shipping. Make America healthy again, you bet. It starts with Balance of Nature. Promo code Chris, balanceofnature.com. Hey there, it's Chris Stigall. You know, this past summer, I went on a cruise with Dr. Sebastian Gorka, Mike Gallagher, my Salem radio colleagues, and I met so many listeners like you who have been on my PhD weight loss program journeys, and I decided for myself it was time to jump in. I wanted to give this Dr. Ashley everybody's been talking about call myself. Dr. Ashley Lucas and her team customize plans for your body to make weight loss simple, and they provide 80% of your food at no additional cost. They treat your whole person, and so I've decided to join so many of you. Join Sebastian Gorka, join Mike Gallagher, and all the weight they've lost. I'd like to do it myself. I've decided to call up my PhD weight loss. I hope you'll join me. Maybe we can start this weight loss journey together. Reach out, get started. Tell them I sent you and said hi. I'd love to hear how you're doing at 864-664-1900. That's 864-664-1900 or myphdweightloss.com. Don't forget to tell them Chris Stigall is going to start losing weight with you. Hey, welcome in. Glad to have you along this morning. Hope you had a very, very blessed weekend. Hope it was a restful one. I hope it was a contemplative one. I hope it was a wonderful Easter celebration for those of you who practice Donald Trump. This is something that in Christian circles, again, those of you who aren't, I mean you no disrespect by discussing it, but those of us in Christian circles, this administration has done more to embrace the faith than certainly most that I'm familiar with in my adult life anyway. Give me 1594 here, Donald Trump with his Easter message this weekend.
Easter Sunday, we celebrate his glorious resurrection and proclaim, as Christians have done for nearly 2,000 years, he is risen. Through the pain and sacrifice of Jesus on the cross, we saw God's boundless love and devotion to all humanity. And in that moment of his resurrection, history was forever changed with the promise of everlasting life. As we approach this joyous Easter Sunday, I want to wish Christians everywhere a happy and beautiful and blessed holiday. America is a nation of believers. We need God. We want God. And with his help, we will make our nation stronger, safer, greater, and more prosperous, and much more united than ever before. Thank you to everyone, and have a really happy Easter.
Great stuff. Now, naturally, the American left likes to take the opportunity of a holy day like Easter to make it political. If there's any way to politicize the death and resurrection of Jesus, it's the American left that's going to figure out the way. Nobody's asking for this, but for some reason, people like Tim Walz's daughter have surfaced with this theology, 1584.
If Jesus were alive today and in the United States, this administration would have already taken him and removed him from this country without due process, claimed he was a member of the MS-13 gang as a way to try to justify not giving him due process, as if there is any justifiable reason to not giving somebody due process. But yeah, some people don't want to talk about that. It truly is baffling how clear and laid out everything is, and there is still people standing by it. I believe in the good of people and like humanity, humans, deep down at our core, like we care about each other. But that's really being tested, because how anyone is okay with this is terrifying to me. But yeah, if you look like me, speak up, speak out, because we might be the only ones safe from what's coming and some of the only people that are able to stop it. So yeah, it's our duty at this point.
If you look like her, what does she look like exactly, Fast Eddie? Can you help me with that? If I look like her, if you look like Tim Walz's daughter, we might be the only ones safe. Well, does that mean not me? I don't think I look like her.
No, you're a white male. I guess you could look like her if you wanted to, part of their religion. Well, but yeah, true. A white female.
So what is she saying? If she's a white women are the only ones left? Boy, folks, if this doesn't explain, do you guys have that clip I sent you a little while ago? Sorry, the late one. And I didn't actually ask earlier. If you don't have it, that's okay. NBC had some polling data. Steve Kornacki Yeah, Khaki Kornacki, if you would please, Paulie, in this clip, Khaki Kornacki explains what that is, what we just heard, and why. I actually shared this before we listened to it. I shared this with my entire family this weekend. I don't typically do politics. Certainly I don't do politics over Easter. But this weekend, I was so blown away by what you're about to hear. That lunatic, that young lady, Ms. Walls, where does that come from? Well, it comes from all of the DEI garbage coming out of all of these Marxist utopias that we call academe, higher education, university systems. In fact, I got a story today that says some 400 colleges and universities have no intention of dropping their DEI programs. Well, take a look at this data. It explains a lot.
See this. White women with at least a college degree, the only group of white voters that really kind of is on the left politically, aligned with progressive causes, democratic politics. Give you an example here. It's that DEI question, right here, that we asked about in our poll. We had two big statements we read to voters. Basically, do you want to continue DEI programs, or do you think they should be ended? And again, look at this divide here. White men, no degree, end it. White men with a degree, end it, they say. White women, no degree, end it, they say, by double digits. And then white women with a college degree, completely different by a nearly 40-point margin, they say, to continue DEI.
Does that not explain it all? That what you just heard from that Walls woman, and when she says people that look like me will be the only ones left to speak, I assume she means young, white, college-educated women. And that explains it. They are absolutely lunatic. They have been indoctrinated in the most lunatic groupthink ever. And most women who are, maybe non-college educated, or didn't go to college. I never liked that term, non-college educated. It sounds insulting, like that's like you didn't go to college, somehow you're less than. I don't believe that for a minute. In fact, I think if anything, that data proves that going to college may be an utter waste of your time for the large majority of the country. But I sent this clip that you just heard to my daughter, and I said, listen, Anna, I love you, and you know I don't talk to you much about politics. You know what Dad believes. You know what we believe as Christians. I'm begging you. I know you desire to go off to college. I'm begging you. Don't become a lunatic. Listen to this. I want you to understand this, that you would be the only demographic group in the country that could go off and become completely mentally hijacked. I want you to go in eyes wide open that is what these places do. They indoctrinate women, and I don't know how they do it. Fast Eddie, you want to take a guess? I'm open to hearing, what is it about women that are susceptible to this indoctrination? Men seem to be rebuffing it. In fact, men seem to be turning the other direction. They're rejecting it, college educated and non-college educated. But yet, young women are they're lapping it up.
I mean, Chris, since I've been in college, white men specifically, have been demonized, taught that you are bad. So I think we're seeing more of an abrasiveness from men. Women, I think, are just more susceptible because you're playing to their good nature. You know, the more kind-hearted, you're playing right into their emotions when you come to with these different causes that we've seen over the past 10 years.
So that's, they believe it is unkind to deport an MS-13 wife-beating, human trafficking gang member, illegal alien. They think it's unkind.
That's exactly right. It's the perfect word for it, yes.
He beats his wife. She said so in court. I wonder if Ms. Walls knows that. Do gals like standing up for wife beaters now? Is that a thing? I didn't know that. I thought you gals were anti-wife abuse. But Van Hollen, in his magical mystery tour, he went all over the Sunday shows. He can't seem to defend Mr. Garcia's behavior, 1597.
You are sticking your neck out for somebody who maybe down the line is proven to be connected to MS-13.
I want to be very clear. I'm not vouching for the man. I'm vouching for the man's rights, his constitutional rights to due process. And the proper place to litigate that is in the courts. And the most recent federal district court judge that looked at this, Judge Zinnes, said that the administration had presented no evidence of his connection to MS-13 or, by the way, to any other criminal gang or terrorist activity. Okay. So, again, all the issues you raised, why aren't they presenting those to the courts? So, again, put up or shut up in court, which is where we litigate these things.
Okay.
I just simply, and I realize it's a legal matter, and I'm going to ask this of Mark Weaver a little later in the show, I simply do not believe that an illegal alien gang member who beats his wife has any rights in the country. Boy, that may be just a terribly unpopular, un-American opinion, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say most Americans agree with me. The guy who broke into the country and is part of MS-13, and it's literally tattooed on his fingers, by the way. It's tattooed on his effing fingers. So don't tell me, where's your evidence? He's a gang member. He's a wife beater. He's here illegally. And I do not believe he's qualified in any circumstance to have any kind of rights bestowed on him by our court system. And yet guys like Van Hollen do. It is a privilege to be an American citizen. It is a privilege to be in this country. We don't extend that privilege to people who break into the country and beat the hell out of women and traffic humans and join gangs. We don't do that here. $855-STIGAL is the telephone number. Yeah, he's just like Jesus. Ms. Walls was not the only one to liken Mr. Garcia to Jesus. So did a Fresno State University philosophy department chair over the weekend, an editorial. For Christians, he writes, Andrew Fiala is the F-I-A-L-A is his name, from Fresno State, the philosophy chair. So you can imagine a deeply spiritual Christian. But at any rate, Easter offers an extremely relevant anti-tyrannical political message, he writes. Oh, I took the bait. I clicked on this one. You ready? For Christians, Easter is ultimately about the empty tomb and its promise of resurrection. But before the resurrection, there was the cross, which was widely viewed as a symbol of a terrifying system of imperial tyranny. You can already see it. This is like before we're through the first set, a frequent instrument of executions during the Roman Empire. Setting aside the miracles and the metaphysics, Easter offers an anti-tyrannical political message. Can you believe this? I mean, I can, because Marxist leftists see politics in everything. They're trying to, again, this is how you corrupt the Word of God. This is how you take Scripture, this is how you take the truth of the Word of God and contort it into politics. It's disgusting. The Easter narrative warns against the dangers of greed, complicity, and despotic power. It condemns the collusion of sycophants and the callous brutality of the mob. Now, let's just pause for one moment, please. The Easter narrative condemns the collusion of sycophants and the callous brutality of the mob. Where have we seen a callous brutality of the mob, if that's what Mr. Fresno State is upset against? I think we've experienced the callous brutality of the mob in the George Floyd riots. I think we've seen the callous brutality of the mob in the recent COVID shutdowns and masking and the forced shots. I think we've seen the collusion of sycophants and the callous brutality of the mob in election 2020, talking about the Hunter Biden laptop. The mob? You want to talk about the mob? How about the callous brutality of the mob on college campuses, the anti-Semites, blocking passage by Jewish students to their class? One of the villains of Easter is Judas, writes the good professor from Fresno State, a money-grubbing thief who betrayed Jesus to the authorities. Another villain is Herod, who also who was also responsible for beheading John the Baptist, but it was Pontius Pilate, the authoritarian Roman ruler of Judea, who conducted the trial of Jesus and was legally responsible for his crucifixion. All of this teaches a lesson about the need for a rules-based system of justice. Such a system would outlaw cruel punishments such as crucifixion. It would prevent authoritarian rulers from consolidating the power to convict and punish. It would not defer to the stupid passions of the mob, nor would it depend upon the greed of paid informants. In general, it would avoid the excesses of swift imperial justice in favor of due process of law. So if you're following this, and I'm not going to submit you to any more of it, but I will just say, this guy, this Fresno State philosophy professor, much like Ms. Walls, would have you believe that the guy with the MS-13 tattoo across his knuckles, a guy who in court, his wife petitioned a court to protect her from his abuse, a guy who broke into the country illegally and it is believed was involved in human trafficking from Texas back up north, stopped in Tennessee. This guy would have you believe that he is Jesus and that Donald Trump is Pontius Pilate and that the mob is crucifying Mr. Garcia. It's bananas. It's morally bankrupt is what it is. Of course, you know that. I've got more of Van Hollen. He can't defend this guy. He can't explain it. He can't defend it. Thankfully, House Republicans are denying any requests from more taxpayer-funded junkets to El Salvador to use this guy as some sort of martyr prop. How disgusting to compromise Easter for a gang member. Traffic getting rolling this morning. Live shot on Salem News Channel of Miami, Florida. Thanks for watching on the Salem News Channel. If, in fact, you are, we're always grateful. Take us along with you on the Salem News Channel app wherever you go. Super easy app. Easiest app you've ever used. That's a promise. Download the Salem News Channel app. It's free. Click on the Watch Live button right there at the top of the screen, and you're off to the races. There's my fat head. I mean, it's one click, and there's the show. You can listen or watch however you like it. Those of you listening on great radio stations all over the country, thank you so much for being here. I hope your weekend was a good one. 855-STIGAL's the telephone number. Let me go to Maine. I don't know that we've spoken to anyone from the state of Maine yet. James is on the horn this morning. James, I'm glad you called. Good morning. Welcome in.
Yeah, good morning. I would just like to say that anytime any of these people have tattoos on them that are from a gang member, they're gang members for life, and they'll never get out of it unless somebody shoots them.
Yeah, and I have heard some say, and I can't know this because I'm not familiar with gang culture, but I have heard some say it is for that reason that Mr. Garcia needs protection and our courts of law to give him a just hearing. What would you say to that? That's not my position. I've just heard that said.
Yeah, well, he's a gang member, and it's even if it wasn't his own gang members that were after him, somebody else would be.
Yeah. While I've got you, James, if you don't mind, because you happen to be, I know you don't speak for all of Mainers out there, but your governor, is she nuts?
I would tell Trump to take her for every penny she's worth.
Is that right? Now, seriously, do you guys talk about her much? I'm just, because I don't know the politics of Maine well. Does she come up? Are people aware that she's in a showdown with Trump legally over this men can play in women's sports thing?
I think she's prominently for the other side. There's two parts of the state of Maine. There's a Republican part, and then there's a Democratic part. And there's two counties that are prominently Democratic, and the rest is Republican. Yeah. And
are you inland, or are you on kind of closer to the coast of Maine? I've only been to Bar Harbor, and it's stunningly spectacular, but I bet that's the liberal part.
I'm kind of inland, but it's just far enough inland that we're part of Cumberland County. We're borderline Cumberland and what's the other? Oxford County.
Yeah.
And so,
Maine is the most beautiful country. I really do. I love it. Are you a lifer there?
Oh, yes. I was born and bred here.
I can hear it. You've got that great classic Maine accent. And it is true, the very best lobster you're ever going to eat. And blueberry pie, if you're into blueberry pie. There's nothing like it there in Maine. Hey, James, it's great to make your acquaintance. I hope you're going to stay in touch. You're the official Maine correspondent of the show, James. Are you listening on an affiliate there?
Yes, Salem News.
Thank you very much, James. Grateful to have you. Stay in touch, please. That's James, our official Maine correspondent, until we get a second one. Ed, keep him in touch. I don't know that I've ever had anybody call the show from Maine before. I love the place. Acadia State Park, or National Park, not State Park. It's one of the national parks. That is one of the most beautiful national parks, I would guess, in the country. I haven't been to all of them. My wife wants to go to all of them and get the passport stamped and everything. But I can tell you, Acadia, lights out, gorgeous. You can go up there and watch the sunset and rise. Get out of here. 855 Stigall's the telephone number. Van Hollen, the Maryland senator, confirming, yes, it is your dollars and mine that pay for his little junket down there to have a lunch with the MS-13 gang member. $15.95, if you would, please.
Who did pay for this trip?
This was an officially cleared, congressional trip, cleared on a bipartisan basis. Yes, like every other trip.
And in 1596, Shannon Bream brings up in this conversation, what about the woman, Rachel Marin, who was most recently viciously murdered by an illegal alien in your state? I don't remember this kind of ballyhoo from you on that.
I don't think that's not the question. I think it's about the mother being unable to understand why you would spend so much time and energy for this person who was not in your state or in the country legally, at which time she felt like you didn't have the same concern about her daughter and her family.
I did have concern. I have concern. My heart goes out to every Maryland family that is the victim of violence, regardless of the perpetrator.
Yeah, it's weird, though. I guarantee you that until last week, nobody knew the name of either Maryland senator. If you walked the streets, Fast Eddie, of most American cities and said, name me one Maryland senator, you'd have kept your money. I'll pay you $100 if you name me one Maryland senator. You'd have kept that 100 in your pocket all day, Fast Eddie. Nobody knows who. Yeah.
Even to this moment, Chris, I know that there was the chick that beat Larry Hogan. I don't even remember her name, so I still fail coming into the show.
Yeah. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the alleged MS-13 member who was deported to El Salvador's notorious mega prison last month, told ICE officers, this from the New York Post, he didn't fear returning to Central America, but before being loaded onto a one-way flight to his home country. Abrego Garcia's admission undercuts a statement he gave to the feds in 2019 expressing that he did in fact fear returning to El Salvador due to the threat of gang violence. In March of that year, Abrego Garcia was taken into custody after local cops found him socializing with MS-13 soldiers in a Maryland Home Depot parking lot, and he was found to be in the United States illegally. A past proven and reliable source told a Hyattsville City Police Department detective Abrego Garcia was a member of MS-13's Western Clique who carried the rank of, I don't know what this is, Chiquito? I don't know. The moniker Chile. Cops also noticed Abrego Garcia was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat and hoodie with rolls of money covering the eyes, ears, and mouth of the presidents on the different denominations, which is indicative of the Hispanic gang culture. And this story goes on. There's extensive reporting about this guy. Tom Holman has had it, as he is always fantastic. He goes over to ABC, cuts 1,600. He dresses down the good senator.
Senator Van Hollen has obviously got a chance to meet with him, but he had to travel to El Salvador to get any information. Does that concern you at all? I mean, these are people sent by the United, I mean, in his case, sent by the United States, and not even a U.S. senator could get any information about his whereabouts or the condition of his incarceration without actually going down and making the trip to El Salvador himself?
Well, he obviously knew his whereabouts because he went there to see him. But you know what bothers me more than that is a U.S. senator traveled to El Salvador on taxpayer dime to meet with an MS-13 gang member, public safety threat, terrorist. I mean, in the meantime, the day before he traveled, an illegal alien was arrested for murder, were released to the streets rather than honoring an ICE detainer in his very own state. What concerns me is Van Halen never went to the border the last 4 years under Joe Biden when he had a 600% increase in sex trafficking in women and children. You have a record number of no-inspected terrorists crossing that border. You had 250,000 Americans die from fentanyl overdose because of the open border. You had over 4,000 illegal aliens died making that journey, which is a historic record. What shocks me is he's remained silent on the travesty that happened on our southern border. Many people died. Thousands of people died. I met with hundreds of angel moms and dads who buried their children that were murdered by an illegal alien. How many angel moms and dads has he met in the state of Maryland? That's what concerns me.
This is upside down. Everybody knows it. Sane people understand what Holman is saying. Insane people, only clinically insane, politically motivated, mentally ill, lunatic people are making an MS-13 gang member illegally in the country, deported back to El Salvador, out to be Jesus during the Easter season. Mentally ill people. Caitlin Collins also took on Holman over at CNN. I love that Holman goes anywhere he's asked. I can't believe these fools invite him on the show. He makes mincemeat of them every time, 1601.
I've seen some people look at this and say they're worried that the stance of this administration when it comes to this is that if someone is deported by accident, that they have no responsibility for them once they are in the custody of a foreign government. What would you say to that?
Well, they're in the custody of El Salvador. He's an El Salvadoran national. He was born in El Salvador. El Salvador has him in custody, and El Salvador decide what happened to him. I mean, again, the El Salvadoran president made it clear he's not going to release him. So again, I'm going to go back. The DOJ, they can fight this out in the courts. I'm not a part of that. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a prosecutor. So we'll let the courts, decide what the next steps will be.
Even though it was a U.S. immigration judge who said the one place he can't go is El Salvador. I mean, he could have been deported literally anywhere else.
Again, we can keep going back and back, but again, that was years ago. Country conditions were different. That gang no longer exists in El Salvador. He had been designated a terrorist since that time. 2 different federal judges said he's an MS-13 member. A police department said he's an MS-13 member. ICE data shows he's an MS-13 member. El Salvador says he's an MS-13 member. As you know, MS-13 has been designated terrorist. The case has the facts of the case have changed since that first decision. So again, I'll leave it up to the DOJ to argue that case in court, but that is where I stand, and that's my belief.
And of course, there's the literal tattoo across his fingers, which Trump himself held up in a photo, and the White House zoomed in on it to remind everybody of it. Incidentally, over at Rasmussen, Mark Mitchell, our friend, the pollster there, posted this a couple of days ago. Trump's approval, according to Rasmussen, is now above where it was just after his swearing in. Net +4 Trump approval rating. Mitchell says, I wouldn't keep harping on this, except the media just keeps obsessing over Trump's approval and only Trump's approval, so it's worth reminding everyone that he's up +4. Now, do you think these lunatics are helping that or hurting that? Serious question. Do you think that Van Hollen and Ms. Walls likening Abreu Garcia to Jesus on Easter? I mean, Fast Eddie, what do you think that's doing for Trump's approval? Sincere question.
My hope is that it's just shooting it in the positive direction for Trump because that's what he ran on.
I don't know about anybody else, but when you take the holiest of our holidays and liken it to an MS-13 thug in an El Salvador prison who broke into the country illegally, that really frosts me. That really gets to the core of who I am as a person, and I think I speak for millions of Americans who may not even be necessarily Christian, but I think I speak for millions of Americans who say it chafes us to hear you talk so glowingly, so lovingly, so passionately, so patriotically about an illegal alien who broke into the country. And, by the way, beats his wife. That isn't a court order. I mean, I'm fairly convinced that the only people that believe this storyline are people that consume traditional left-wing media outlets. The good news is that here in the United States, there are so many media outlets, and you see why there was an obsession by the Biden administration to control it, why they had a Minister of Information office try to pop up. Once upon a time, when Democrats were in control, they thought that they could basically control all flows of social media and media outlets. And so if they wanted to coordinate a message like this Garcia guy, this MS-13 gang member, is Jesus, which is what they're saying. I mean, that's what they've corrupted the holiest holiday in the Christian tradition, and they have made an illegal alien gang member out to be Christ, and that somehow, and they've literally written as much, that Trump is somehow Pontius Pilate crucifying Jesus all over again in the modern era by sending an illegal alien gangbanger back to El Salvador, that this is analogous. The only people that believe this are white women in college. Literally no one else in the country believes this. No one has sympathy for Mr. Garcia. No one who's sane. White liberal women do, and that's it. And I don't know where they get their information, but the truth of the matter is, I hear from PJ Media, Tulsi Gabbard exposes a terrifying Biden-era program that was meant to be secret. In a stunning move that has D.C. establishment scrambling, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard just declassified what might be the most disturbing government document of the Biden era. Their deceptively named Strategic Implementation Plan for Countering Domestic Terrorism. Let's cut through the bureaucratic noise, writes Matt Moore-Gullis at PJ Media. Let's cut through the noise and call it what it really is. Systemic blueprints for targeting and silencing conservative Americans. While Biden was preaching unity from his teleprompter, his administration was quietly crafting plans to turn big tech into their personal censorship machine. The scheme reads like a progressive wish list, monitoring suspicious online speech, that is, conservative viewpoints, expanding federal watch lists to include Americans with the wrong political beliefs, and you guessed it, finding new ways to chip away at Second Amendment rights, all under the guise of protecting democracy. You see, if they had it their way, this campaign that they're waging, using Albreo Garcia as a Christ-like figure in the modern era, it would work, because you'd be forbidden from contradicting it on social media if they got their way. But thankfully, they didn't get their way. Meanwhile, the Democrats, not only are they helping Trump and his approval rating, as I just told you with the news that came from Rasmussen, that Trump is now +4 in approval from January 30th. Little David Hogg, the cherub from Parkland, the Democrats have made their vice chair. And the Democrats will not drop this men can be women thing. They won't drop it. So I don't. I used to give Democrats credit for being schemers, for being 2 steps ahead all the time. This is defying anything that makes any sense to me. Bill Maher has been tearing into this ever since he went to the White House to visit Donald Trump. Give me 1581 from this weekend.
Americans are in support of deporting criminals. Absolutely. Violent criminals, it's like 97-1. Yes, deport the violent criminals, but they're not in favor at all of the president of the United States defying the Supreme Court. It's like an 80-20 issue. He's on the wrong side of that.
But okay, but so what? If I may address the little shot you just gave me, so what? Okay? I don't understand this. We're at that part of the movie where there's a gunfight and the guy, and then click, click. There's no more bullets in the gun. We have no power. So how do we handle this? And Gretchen Whitmer showed us one way. Can we show that picture? Because she was in the Oval Office, same place I was a few weeks before. And this is what she did. Okay, I think there's a couple of ways to handle the Oval Office, and this is not the way I chose. You don't want to talk to people? You have no power.
All right, that's Bill Maher. You have no power, you're out of bullets. Gretchen Whitmer hiding her face as she's in the Oval Office. Bill Maher's embarrassed of his party, is what he's saying, and he's desperate that they get on message and offer something. And he's saying to this jackwagon guest of his, he can't believe what he's hearing. They're dying on the hill of men can be women, and let's give all due deference to illegal alien gang members. This is where Democrats are hanging their hat. And their little cherub vice chair, David Hogg, boy, the story's not good on this guy. Generational change could be coming fast for Senate Democrats. In unprecedented move, DNC official to spend big to take down fellow Democrats. David Hogg trashes democracy as a political system. Little David Hogg igniting a circular firing squad inside the DNC. He was making media trips this weekend, trashing the Ragin' Cajun James Carville. He's going after the entire Democrat class that's left. They want to go harder left. Men can be women. Due process and due deference to illegal alien gang members. This is where they're hanging their hats. AOC, Bernie, the oligarchy. We're going to get into the legal ramifications of all of this, the Supreme Court weighing in over the weekend, where this came from and why, with the brilliant Mark Weaver in just a little bit. We're also going to continue to cover the death of Pope Francis, who died overnight, Monday in Rome at age of 88. We intend to hear from the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, I believe, so sit tight for that. Here we are, 2025. Happy New Year, and our friends at Gulag America are back and along for the ride. You know, they have been not only great sponsors, but they have been ride or die founders at the Harump Society. I'm so appreciative for our friends at Gulag America. I love the work they do, and we have every reason to be optimistic in this new year. They are, we are, all of us are. America's resurgence, it's back. Trump's back, and Gulag America wants to continue to be your premier source for topical and satirical apparel and other gear designed to help give you voice for your love of liberty and your desire to see America great again. I know we all share that in common. Gulag America does too, but that doesn't mean that the deep state's not going to be busy at work. They're not going to go gently into the good night, as they say. So Gulag America is ready. They want you battle ready. They want you geared up, and they've got hilarious stuff for you to buy, and they're going to give it to you at a deep discount to kick off the new year. You ready for this? You take 15% off all orders at gulagamerica.com when you use my promo code Chris15. So if you go shopping today and you see a shirt you like, and you will because they're hilarious, go to gulagamerica.com, type the promo code Chris15. That's Chris15. Type it in the checkout, and then you'll save big. Enjoy the new year. Enjoy new savings with that same quality, that same hilarious attitude that you've come to expect from our buddies at Gulag America, where they say, it's not our wish, it is our warning. We are grateful on a Monday to bring in my buddy Mark Weaver, who is a brilliant guy. He's a former DOJ spokesperson. He's authored a book called A Wordsmith's Work. He's also a constitutional scholar, a practicing officer of the court himself. And Mark, good Monday to you. I hope you had a blessed Easter weekend, my friend.
Good morning. I did. A great day with family, and now this morning my condolences are with my Catholic friends.
Yes. I am so perplexed by this one. I was so grateful you had time, because this one, I need help. Alito wrote a pretty scathing dissent over the weekend when the Supreme Court stepped in and told Trump that they cannot send a bunch of Tren de Aragua illegals back to Venezuela. The Supreme Court, literally in the middle of the night on Saturday or something, said you got to stop. And I don't mean to read to this audience, and I don't mean to bore this audience or make people's eyes glaze over, but I'm reading from Town Hall today. Alexander wrote this. Alito said it wasn't clear the court had jurisdiction to stop Trump, Mark, since the district court judge failed to rule on the ACLU's request for a temporary restraining order by the deadline. It was likely premature for plaintiffs to appeal. He said the Fifth Circuit denied jurisdiction for the appeal due to that. So the ACLU went to one court. The court didn't rule by the deadline. The ACLU went to another court, and the court said, I can't rule on this. The previous court didn't rule on it. And somehow they got all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supremes decided to take it up. Now, for a court that seems like they have been slow-walking and unwilling to get involved in a lot of this, and we've waited for weeks and weeks, where did this come from, Mark? Take it away.
Well, you're speaking to us from the Keystone State, and reading this case reminds me of the Keystone Cops. This was not well done by the Supreme Court. Remember, the Supreme Court is the court of last resort. It's supposed to only step in after the lower courts have fully made it clear what's happening. That's in the rules. That's in previous rulings by Chief Justice Roberts, that you have to establish your record. In this case, the only people who know whether or not a group of these illegal immigrants were about to be deported is the Trump administration, who had previously told the district court that there was no immediate removal about to happen. So ACLU's feigned emergency, which appears to have gotten 7 justices on its side, I think had no basis in fact, and that's what's so troubling about this order.
What process is this guy due? The Garcia guy, if I could go back to that story for a minute, because this is another thing I'm hearing. And the Supreme Court has intimated that Trump is responsible for getting him back, too. And this Boasberg and others are suggesting that the Supreme Court ought to hold the Trump administration in contempt or something and force them to... What? Can I just back away and ask you, because you are an officer of the court, I cannot, and I think I speak for most Americans when I say, why are we falling all over ourselves to extend due process rights to people who break into this country? Mark, help me understand it sincerely.
Well, everybody who's in the country has some low minimum level of due process. If you're visiting here from Canada or from Spain, you can't be grabbed and then taken into jail and tortured. The Bill of Rights would give you remedies to stop that. But citizens have many more due process rights than someone who's here illegally. In this case, this Abrigar Garcia person, who's clearly a member of MMS 13, he was subject to a deportation order. He was already allowed to be taken anywhere in the world, except according to one administrative law judge, not back to his home country of El Salvador. Now, most of your listeners think administrative law judge is a judge the way we think about the Supreme Court being judges or other federal judges. That's not true. Those are not Article 3 judges. These are Article 2 judges. They work for the executive branch. So the executive branch could come in and undo any of the administrative law judge's decisions, including saying, you know what, that whole thing about don't send him back to El Salvador, we don't think you're right on that. We think he can go back to El Salvador. So it's always going to be the executive's prerogative anyway where he goes. He's subject to deportation. This Maryland Senator Von Holland, who's spending tax dollars to go down there and drink mimosas or margaritas or whatever he's doing with the guy, he's putting a whole lot of energy into somebody who's literally not his constituent because he literally cannot vote for that senator.
Let's talk about the Alien Enemies Act. Trump using this, it goes way, way back, as I understand it, to the 1800s. And there are people that are going after this hard, that Trump doesn't have jurisdiction here, this doesn't extend his right to do this or what have you. What is the, in your view, what is the executive's right, responsibility, role to deport? And then there's the judicial branch getting involved to stop. I mean, Alito basically said the Supreme Court had absolutely, he doesn't believe the Supreme Court even legally got in the way of the executive branch's decision to deport a bunch of Tren de Aragua gang members.
Yeah, I can tell you did your homework because the 2 points you've raised are the heart of Alito's dissent. He was joined by Clarence Thomas, who are clearly the only reliable conservatives on this court anymore, Thomas and Alito. I've met both of them. They're both solid people. I have a lot of respect for their jurisprudence. Here's what the main point of Alito's dissent was saying. Congress gave the president power under the Alien Enemies Act to make decisions whenever there's been an act of war or a declaration of war, but I think in this case the one that's most relevant, a predatory incursion of the country. And the president gets to decide what that is. The Supreme Court has previously said the president gets to decide what that is. Donald Trump issues a proclamation saying that, in fact, there has been a predatory incursion, and he's going to start removing people based on this law that Congress gave him that authority. And now people are acting as though the executive doesn't have that authority. They do. There's very little room for judicial review other than the habeas corpus process, which the Supreme Court has said the administration has to go through. The administration was going through that when the ACLU leapt into the craziness of Friday night for no good reason and somehow bamboozled the U.S. Supreme Court to come along with it.
Democrats are making these people out to be. I mean, what they're trying to do, and I find this the height of irony and laughable, that the American left, who's embraced all this anti-Semitism and chants from the river to the sea, they're now invoking all of this Holocaust vernacular, which is interesting because Democrats, I mean, when you hear them talk about Jews and Israel and the Holocaust, they're very dismissive. Some of them even doubt it happened, apparently. But now all of a sudden, Garcia and these Tren de Aragua people, they're the Jews, they're the Japanese, rounded up in internment camps. It's so offensive and ridiculous and revisionist, but is there any analogy to be made here between the Japanese internment camps under Roosevelt and what Trump's doing?
No. Yeah, this is something you and I have not talked about. I was the original spokesperson for the Office of Redress, which was the Justice Department office that gave apologies and checks to the American citizens of Japanese ancestry who were interned by FDR. They weren't even Japanese citizens. There's no comparison. That was wrong. What FDR did was wrong because they were American citizens. The people we're talking about here are not American citizens. They have no right to be here. And they're not the best of us. They're the worst of us. They're not even just a random street gang like you might see from West Side Story, where they're wearing clever leather jackets and singing and being, having fun with each other. These are the deadliest gangs we know of in America, whose motto is and whose goal is to rape and murder. And the Democrats have come to their aid. Another day, we can have another discussion, if you like, invite me back, to talk about the political nonsense, the political inanity of Democrats stepping into bear traps and stepping onto rakes by coming to the defense of people like Tren de Aragua and MS-13.
As we headed into the Holy Weekend, the Supreme Court also said that they're going to hear arguments on birthright citizenship. And I do want to have you back soon, in fact, because that's going to unfold sooner than later, and I think we ought to have a talk about that too, Mark Weaver, but we've run out of time today, so I'll leave it there. I really appreciate you jumping into action first thing this morning, Mark. Thanks so much.
Always great to be with you, my friend.
Mark Weaver wrote the great book called A Wordsmith's Work. I hope you'll pick it up. He is a great constitutional scholar, attorney, former DOJ spokesperson, and you can follow him on X at Mark R. Weaver. Mark R. Weaver. Thank you very much for listening all across the country. Like on great radio stations, 660 AM in Dallas, we're watching a beautiful picture of the sun coming up in Dallas this morning on the Salem News Channel as well. If that's where you watch, we hope you do. Take the Salem News Channel app along with you, and you can click Watch Live, and right there it'll pop up. It's super easy to take along with you and watch and or listen wherever you do. Thanks to those of you who choose to listen to the podcast later. Always fantastic. And you can review anything you've missed, of course, on the podcast each and every day. All of that stuff is linked at chrisstigall.com. Reaction this morning as we woke to the news that the Pope at age 88 has died. He'd been battling an illness for quite some time, but presided over some ceremonial Easter events at the Vatican yesterday. So somewhat poetic. I wanted to get the reaction from folks in the know, if you will, who could best speak to this with authority. And we were grateful that Father Dennis Gill, rector and pastor of the Cathedral Basilica of Saints Peter and Paul in Philadelphia, as well as the director of the Office for Divine Worship for the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, could join us. Father Gill, thank you very much for your time this morning. Oh, I apologize. He's not with us now. He's coming up. That was quite a setup. Well, then I got all of that out of the way fast, Eddie. How did we get a hold of him, by the way, while I've got it? I'm sorry. We have him next segment. I thought we had him this segment. But anyway, how did we reach him?
I've reached
That's
out.
pretty good of you.
Through his email and through a friend, actually. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. Yeah, we have some. Now, you yourself, what are you, because I don't want to be insensitive to this. How do Catholics process this news?
The loss of the pontiff is a big blow. But me, I to be perfectly honest, I'm ready for the next chapter in our leadership. Yeah. To be perfectly honest, I don't think I actually go back to a conversation you had with one of your guests before, Megan Basham, about some of the Pope's comments, and she brought something up that was kind of along the wavelength of what I feel. It's almost as if he tests things. He throws out words, tests phrases, and sees how people are going to react to him and said, well, obviously that's not what I meant. So I'm looking forward to moving forward with Catholicism to where maybe we're not having that discussion and the media isn't taking what he's saying out of proportion.
So Father Pavone earlier in the show today said he thinks that the majority of cardinals who will make the decision on the new pope are traditional, and that they will go back to a more orthodox traditional pope. Do you think that or no?
I do. Yes, I do.
You're optimistic that way. All right.
I am.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right. I do. I hope for Catholics that you're right. I sincerely do. Anyway, we will have Father Gill coming up in the next segment. My apologies. I had a minor stroke there. I was very excited to talk with him. Maybe that was why. Here's another thing I'll just mention briefly, but I don't particularly care about it. They're still trying to take out Pete Hegseth. And once this Abreu Garcia thing runs out of gas, which it basically has, we're turning a page. Van Hollen has pretty much run out of gas, I think, on the Sunday shows. I don't think this story is going to last another week. I could be wrong. They're going to try to milk it. But Trump's approval rating continues to go up and up and up. And by the way, you know what? Every time they stand up and defend Tren de Aragua and MS-13 gang members, do you know what we're not talking about? And I think Trump is just fine with it. What aren't we talking about right now, Fast Eddie? Big topic. Starts with a T.
Oh, okay. Oh, T.
Tariffs. We're not talking about tariffs. We're not talking about the economy, right? I mean, like if I'm Democrats, the thing I'm doing right now, if I'm Democrats, I'm harping on the economy. I thought you were going to turn the economy around. They're not. They're defending gang members. They're talking about whether men can be women. It's lunatic stuff. And Trump's approval is going up every time they say we need to keep these Tren de Aragua guys here in the country. We need to give them due process. We need to bring back MS-13 guys who are here illegally. We need to bring them out of prison and bring them back here. United States senators on the Democrat side. That's how they're spending their time. I really can't get my head wrapped around it, actually. David Hogg, I was mentioning the little cherub from Parkland earlier. He is throwing bombs right and left into his own party. And he's going to be one that I think they're going to lament anointing him. They tried to do this as throwing a bone to the progressives, and he seems to just be making things demonstrably worse. And guys like Bill Maher, I'm going to get into this a little later. Charlie Kirk visited Bill Maher's podcast, and they talked about it. And it's amazing how Maher is basically conceding his party has so lost its way, he doesn't recognize it. He doesn't know what to do. Live look at Vatican City on Salem News Channel if you're watching us, snc.tv. You can get the Salem News Channel app and take us along with you. Really easy to use. Click Watch Now, and you'll see it if you want to watch it. And thanks for listening on great Salem radio stations all over the country. I was so excited that we got him booked on the show. I introduced him a segment too early. He wasn't even here yet. Now he's here. I can confirm. Father Dennis Gill, rector and pastor of the Cathedral Basilica of Saints Peter and Paul in Philadelphia. He's also the director of the Office for Divine Worship for the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. Father Gill, now we go. Good morning. How are you, sir?
Good morning. I'm very happy to be with you today, and thank you for this opportunity.
Of course. I'm honored that you could take the time today because this is something, look, I'm a Protestant guy. I don't know all there is to know about the papacy, but I would love for you to educate us a little bit. Reaction inside the Philadelphia Archdiocese today and around the country.
Well, we were all caught by surprise this morning to wake up to the news that our Holy Father died early in the morning, Rome time, and we are, as Christians, called immediately to pray. There's something really remarkable about the timing of his death. We're very much in the midst of celebrating Easter, the octave of Easter, the powerful reality of Christ risen from the dead, and to have our Holy Father's death wrapped up in this mystery in such a vivid and palpable way is a consolation to us. And we pray for his soul, we pray for the happy repose of his soul, and we pray for the church. It's a very dramatic and emotional and intense moment for us, and one that needs to be well grounded in prayer and faith.
You mentioned, obviously, yesterday being Easter Sunday. He met with Vice President Vance, I believe, on Easter Sunday, and I'm not sure if that was before or after, but he also gave an Easter blessing there in Vatican
correct.
City, which that's remarkable. I mean, I'm sorry, maybe you can speak to that.
I'm not sure the timing of the meeting with the Vice President, but the blessing of the city and the world happened midday, and he was able to extend his blessing, and someone else did read his words. I find it just an amazing tribute to Pope Francis that, especially during the sacred Paschal Triduum, Good Friday, Holy Saturday, Easter Sunday, that even though he was not able to preside at the sacred liturgy as would be his custom, he made himself present. And for people to see him, it was a great consolation, I know. So,
Father Dennis Gill is with us, rector and pastor at the Cathedral Basilica of Saints Peter and Paul in Philadelphia. Can you speak to the process now? Earlier, a guest informed us it's 9 days of mourning, and then I guess the process of cardinals selecting a new pope begins?
Yes. So there are rites in place that mark the death of the pope and the transition for a new pope. The funeral will be established. We'll soon hear when that will be. And then there'll be 9 formal days of mourning. And then there'll be meetings of the cardinals, and then a date for the conclave will be set for the election of the new pope. So that's what it's going to look like for the next couple of weeks. I think we'll probably hear about the funeral date today.
Okay. As we talk about the selection of a new pope, I obviously no one's really privy, I guess, except the cardinals in the room as the discussion. But like everything, politics has crept into the discussion, and I have heard some say that, certainly those who maybe are more conservative, or however you want to frame that, I don't know. I don't mean to drag you into politics, but I've heard some say maybe someone in keeping with a more orthodox Catholicism from the continent of Africa would be exactly what the church needs now. Can you speak to that? Again, I don't want to drag you into politics necessarily, but can you speak to different points of view from around the world and who might be the next pope?
I have absolutely no idea. However, I would like to start here. What the church needs most of all are committed Christians. Anybody could be the pope on the one hand. But what the church is made up of, all of us, and our own fidelity to Christ and his word all the time is what is most significant to the salvation of the world and for our journey to everlasting life. The role of the Holy Father, the Bishop of Rome, the successor of St. Peter, the Vicar of Christ, is to animate the church in her fidelity to Christ. And so I hope and pray that the new Holy Father, whomever it may be, will be a very faith-filled, holy bishop to lead the church in the years ahead. I wouldn't want to say anything more because we then become political and we look at the election in a very horizontal way. Not that that's not present, but the tradition of the church has a deep reliance on the power and presence of God, the Holy Spirit, in the selection of the Holy Father, not discounting other things taking place, but we need to intensely pray that that is what will happen.
Do you sense, and again, it is, and I respect the response, and I'm mindful that it sounds as though maybe I'm pushing on this, and I don't mean to, but I'm just curious because I don't have a perspective. Right. Do you believe cardinals are impacted politically? Do you believe any of them to be driven somewhat, if you want, ideologically or politically outside the scriptures? Is that a real thing or not? We would like it to not be true, but is it true?
it's as real for you as it is for them. Mm-hmm. None of us can escape that.
Yeah.
We're shaped by the air we breathe and the people we encounter and what we think is, according to our own mind, what is best for the future. So I would say yes.
Would you say the majority of cardinals are not? I talked with a previous guest today. He said that he did not believe that most cardinals are driven politically. Not most. Fair assessment?
I don't know that. I wouldn't be able to gauge that.
How many? And again, forgive my ignorance. I'm just curious. How many cardinals make a decision on Pope altogether?
All the cardinals under the age of 80, and so there are 120-some, 30-some under the age of 80. They would participate in the actual election of the Pope. Now,
and is that a majority, a plurality? Yeah. How does that work?
Well, the rules are set in a very detailed form for how the election takes place. And so it would need to be the majority of cardinals favoring a particular candidate, and the vote will continue until they settle on one.
I was interested to know, Father, that Benedict, when he stepped down from the papacy and Francis became Pope, I didn't know this. Is it true they were both residents of the Vatican until Benedict's death? They were it wasn't a co-branch, but how did that work?
No, there's only one Holy Father, and it was a remarkable time in history for Pope Benedict to set aside the papal office. And when he did that, he moved to another location within Vatican City State. He never functioned in any way as a co-Holy Father, or he never had any role in the church that would suggest that he shared responsibility with Pope Francis. He was retired. He was Pope Emeritus. And so even though he continued to carry the title Pope and wear the white cassock, he had no legal authority in the church as a Holy Father. Now, so they both did live in Vatican City State, but in two very different locations. And Pope Benedict had really nothing to do with the working of the church in terms of a leadership responsibility.
Father Dennis Gill is with us. He is director of the Office for Divine Worship for the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. Not but too long ago, the Pope visited Philadelphia for what was known as the World Meeting of Families. I assume you were a part of that. Were you able to meet the Pope?
2015, and I have wonderful, vivid memories of his visit. It just was an incredible time for the church in Philadelphia, and for me personally, in preparing for that visit, one of my most significant memories was welcoming our Holy Father to our Cathedral Basilica at the front door. It's just absolutely beautiful, absolutely wonderful. So,
what does this time mean for Catholics going forward? Help us non-Catholics understand it.
Well, for Catholics, it is a great occasion for us, a tremendous occasion for us to pray, to go before the Lord Jesus and ask for his assistance and guiding in the church during this period, guiding our mourning, strengthening our hope and the power of his resurrection, and most importantly, for the church, that the church may know the presence of Christ in the selection of the new Holy Father.
Father Dennis Gill, I'm grateful for your time. I know it's an extraordinary time, and that you could make quick turnaround time for us this morning. We're awfully appreciative, sir. Thank you.
Oh, you're most welcome, really. I'm happy, first of all, that you invited me. I'm happy to speak to all those who are listening, to join with me and the whole church in Philadelphia, to pray during this period for the repose of the soul of Pope Francis and for the church herself. I'm grateful for that opportunity.
Thank you, Father. Appreciate it. That's Father Dennis Gill, rector and pastor of the Cathedral Basilica, St. Peter and Paul in Philadelphia, director of the Office of Divine Worship for the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. Good job, Ed. That's I guess in the church, he'd be known as a muckety-muck.
What's that?
Right? A big guy, a head honcho, a senior, a big dude.
Yes, sir.
Yeah?
Yeah, right to the top almost.
Good job. Good job. All right, 855 Stigall is the telephone number. Let's get a call in here, shall we? What do you say? Let's go to Leonard in Texas. Leonard, you've been very patient. I'm grateful. Good morning.
Good morning, Chris. Over the weekend I saw all those pictures of Van Hollen and Garcia sitting there talking, right? And
yes.
Fox said that Garcia had been before 17 judges. So I'm sitting there thinking, did Van Hollen say, so, hey, Garcia, how'd you meet all those judges?
Yeah, he Van Hollen on a couple of different occasions was quick to say, I'm not here to vouch for his character. I don't have anything to do. No, I'm sure you're not. Live shot of the Boston Marathon. 9:50 a.m. WROL in Boston, our great Salem affiliate there on the radio. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you've got a great overhead shot of Patriots Day. I was just informed that every Patriots Day is when the Boston Marathon happens, and that is today. So good luck. And I know people who have participated in that before. That's a big deal to qualify. As a guy who doesn't like to get up off the chair generally, I don't know anything about it, but for people who run, that's a big deal, Ed, to get to qualify for the Boston Marathon. Big deal.
Yeah, I haven't qualified myself yet. Sorry.
No. I probably never will see that. But good luck to all who participate. Speaking of Massachusetts, Paul Revere's ride. Friday, 250 years ago, the White House released this clip.
Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. On the 18th of April in 75, hardly a man is now alive. He said to his friend, if the British march by land or sea from the town tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the North Church Tower as a signal light. 1 if by land and 2 if by sea, and I on the opposite shore will be. So through the night rode Paul Revere, and so through the night went his cry of alarm. To every Middlesex village and farm, a cry of defiance and not to fear. A voice in the darkness, a knock at the door, and a word that shall echo forevermore. For born on the night wind of the past, through all our history to the last, in the hour of darkness, in peril and need, the people will waken and listen to hear the horrifying hoofbeats of that seed and the midnight message of Paul Revere.
I think that was voiced by Caroline Levitt, the White House releasing that on the 250th anniversary of Paul Revere's Midnight Ride. 855 Stigall is the telephone number if you want to get in here. I told you earlier that if this Garcia thing starts to run out of gas, and I suspect it's going to soon, it's doing nothing but helping Trump's approval. I mean, here we're talking about Patriots Day in Boston. You're talking about 250 years since Paul Revere. And what are Democrats doing? Well, before I get to Hegseth again, I'm not going to forget my place. But 1603, listen to this. Jamie Raskin, also from Maryland, this lunatic. This is as far from Paul Revere. You know, Paul Revere, the British are coming. Now it should be the Democrats are coming. The Democrats are coming.
I like that idea, and it's a complement to something that we need to be doing right now, which is engaging in far more work of transnational democratic solidarity with the democratic governments and the democratic movements and peoples and parties of the world.
Totally agree.
To try to prevent the spread of the lawlessness and the fascist chaos that's been unleashed against us. But implicit in it should be the idea that if and when we come back to power, and we will, we are not going to look kindly upon people who facilitated, to use a word of the day, who facilitated authoritarianism in our country. Because that's an assault on our Constitution and on our people.
So that is a direct threat to any foreign government, like Bukele, the president of El Salvador, I presume. That is a little pipsqueak twerp member of Congress saying you'd better watch out when we Democrats come into power, we will punish any country that worked with our president? Paul Revere's Midnight Ride, indeed. The Democrats are coming. The Democrats are coming. Speaking of the Democrats, little David Hogg, the cherub over there at Parkland, Not a fan of James Carville. James Carville, not a fan of his. But this is a real schism that nobody's talking about right now. They're trying to find their voice. They're hitching their wagon to men being women and Tren de Aragua and MS-13. Here's a conversation with the little cherub, talking with Elizabeth Landers, someone from Scripps, in an interview about the future of the Democrat Party. 1592. Listen.
The well-known Democratic strategist James Carville said in response to this announcement of this plan that you have to primary Democrats, he said that the DNC should sue you and called you, quote, a contemptible little twerp. What is your reaction to that?
Try it. That is my reaction. I would also say James Carville has not won an election since before I was born. I think it's time to have new leaders in our party that are ready to meet this moment, because a lot of the people that are most critical of this plan are the same ones that had $2 billion to win an election and still lost. So I think the experts can save it, because it's time for some new ideas.
Ooh, salty. I personally am here for it. Pop the popcorn. I think it's good fun. They're rudderless. They have nothing. As evidence, back to Hegseth for a minute. I know I've mentioned this twice. I haven't forgotten my place. They think they're still going to get something out of this signal bit, Ed. They can't. Okay, so it's men can be women, Tren de Aragua, MS-13, and now we're back to Signal again. When all else fails, New York Times is back on the Signal app. Now, the New York Times is reporting that the DOJ is, or I'm sorry, not DOJ, DOD, the Defense Department, is in chaos under Pete Hegseth, and apparently there are a couple of Pentagon associates who are friends of his that were also part of a Signal app chat about the strike on the Houthis, including his wife. Now they got him. They want Hegseth out of there. And so Tren de Aragua or take down Pete Hegseth via a Signal app. That's their gameplay. That's it. Meanwhile, James Carville and the little cherub David Hogg fight it out. It's delightful, and Trump's approval rating just keeps going up. Good luck, kids. So that's a wrap for another Chris Stigall Show podcast. Thanks for committing to it, listening to it all the way through. You're a fighter. I like that about you. Hope you'll leave it a 5-star review and a written review. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We'll see you next time here on the Chris Stigall Show podcast.
The Chris Stigall Show podcast.